Alessandro Zampieri. You're a doctoral researcher at the Faculty of Theology and Religious Studies at the same university. And your doctoral research project is also part of this larger project on 1 Corinthians. You will explore the transmission of the first letter to the Corinthians as preserved in Origen's works, primarily. But you're also interested in the wider contextual factors, in particular, the Egyptian gnostic context. So today we will get something from that wider context in your paper titled The First Letter to Corinthians in the Interpretation of Knowledge. That is Nag Hammadi, one of the tracts. Yeah, so welcome, Alessandro.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for accepting my paper. I'm honored to be here at the Birmingham Colloquium. And I'm a first-year PhD student in Kouloven on the project, on the OneCore project founded by the FWO, the Research Foundation of Flanders. My PhD, as I've been introducing, is on the Origen citations of the Origen text of one of the first letter to Corinthians. But today I am presenting on the use of the Pauline body imagery in the interpretation of knowledge. I came across this topic while looking at the citations of the first letters to Corinthians in the Nag Hammadi library. In the text of the interpretation of knowledge, as you can see in the second image, there are several citations and allusions to the first letter to Corinthians, and most of them are from the 12th chapter. So I wanted to go deeper into this topic, into this aspect of the text, and trying to understand how this chapter is used and why it plays such an important role in this Nag Hammadi text. My presentation is divided in 3 parts. In the first part, I will explain very shortly the context in which the interpretation of knowledge has been found and is preserved. Then I will show the differences and the similarities between the body imagery in the 2 texts, in the first letter to Corinthians and the interpretation of knowledge. And finally, I'll try to explain how these same figures of the body as a community has been banded for different purposes than the one of Paul. The purpose of this paper, is to explain how a 2nd century Christian community reads and uses the 12th chapter of the first letter to Corinthians. I will analyze the textual passages concerning this topic, pointing out differences between the 2 texts and try to understand how these are useful to a better understanding. So, first of all, a bit of context. The interpretation of knowledge is a Coptic text found in Nag Hammadi in 1945. We are in Egypt. In the first bit, you can see the 13th codices that have been found in a very adventure and exotic way. We don't know how the real history went, but in the second bit, you can see the Nag Hammadi site. And it was a very important, it has been a very important discovery because the whole library consists of 13 codices made by papyrus book bounded together. And it was buried in the second half of the 4th century AD, near Nag Hammadi. And from the 52 works that we have found, that they have found, 41 were completely unknown. It is a collection of very strange-sided texts, because we can see Christian texts, Gnostic texts, Valentinian ones, Tatian ones, Hermetical ones, and also a very brief translation in Coptic of Plato's Republic. And a very important thing to remember is that all this library has been translated from Greek into Coptic. This is not an original Coptic literature. The interpretation of knowledge is the first tractate that we find in the 11th codex of this collection, and it is written in the so-called Nag Hammadi dialect. I use the termination that Funk, Van Scholden Thompson uses in the latest edition because the Nag Hammadi dialect is close to Achaemenic, but it has some phonetic variants that are not the same with their mimic, so they try to, still trying to understand if this is a real dialect or not. I will just go with Pang's definition of it. So what is this text? Unfortunately, this is one of the worst preserved texts of the library, of the collection, because only the 7.5% of it is readable. And here you have from the facsimile of the Nag Hammadi codices, what are we talking about? These are the 6th and 7th page of the interpretation of knowledge. Luckily, for the part in which I'm interested, the 18th and 17th and 19th page, the text is a little bit preserved better, but we're not talking about such quality of preservation. What is this text? There have been three main theories about the literary genre of this interpretation of knowledge. The first one was proposed by Koshorke in 1978, and he said that this could have been a gemeine Ordnung, a sort of philosophical manifest of a community exposing its core principles. This hypothesis has been criticized in 1990 by Pagels and Turner, who think they propose that this is a homily given by a gnostic priest to a community. And this because in the text there is we can imagine the presence of an audience. In the text is used the second in the first person singular and plural, and also the second person singular and plural. So they think we can suppose that there is a talker, a speaker, and an audience who's hearing and listening to this speaker. But Emmel in 2003 criticized also Pagels and Turner and tried to sum up and unify these two theories, proposing that this could be a private letter from an individual to another individual, and it could be a sort of philosophical letter. He says this because he notes that in the second person plural and the second person singular is used only on the quotations that are present in this text. So he thinks that this is not an argument that can be brought to understand and to imagine an audience in front of a speaker. Most probably, it was a philosophical letter to someone. So, however, the letter can be divided into two sections. The first one, the less preserved one, we have citations of the parable of the sower, of the Good Samaritan. We have some interpretation of the crucifixion of Jesus according to John. And this is core thematic for Emmel to understand and to define this work and this writing philosophical letter because of the sophisticated exegesis that this text has. In the second part, there are all the features of an exhortative text. There are, we can read a continuous teaching and exhorting by the author, by the writer, to the reader, audience, we don't know it, in order to show the benefits of being inside the community. In fact, in this text, we see that the community or the individual to which this text is addressed has some tensions in it. The extant text mentions at least one member who does not want to be part of the community anymore. And we can assume that he had expressed his dissatisfaction with the different social positions inside the community, inside the so-called church. In fact, from page 15 onward, the text reveals that some members, or one, are unhappy because they have been accorded a lower status in the community than others. There are members who excel in spiritual gifts, such as prophetic speech and rhetoric ability, and others do not possess this gift. The writer says that outside the community there is only death, and he tries to restabilize the harmony in the community with two arguments. The first one is a very gnostic. The division in the community, in this church, is a reflection of a cosmological division. So as the archons and powers, who in the Gnostic cosmology are these powerful, malevolent beings who are trying to enforce the boundaries in the material world of the Gnostic souls during their try to reach the pneumatic world. As I was saying, these archons and powers are fighting against these true Gnostics, trying to tame them in materiality, making them forget of the divinity inside of them, and the community so is divided between high-level members and low-level members. Due to the fragmentary status of the text, obviously it is not clear whether this member is a real danger to the community itself. The second strategy that he uses is a most rhetorical one, a literary one. And he uses the Pauline body imagery to legitimize the social differences and to re-emphasize the harmony in the community. Each member is linked to a distinct part of the body, each with a specific role, underscoring that no one should harbor jealousy or resentment towards one another. Instead, members should express gratitude for their place within the body of Christ, acknowledging a shared head and purpose. Let's see the passage and confront it with the and confront it with the passage of the fourth letter to Corinthians. I will leave the translation, the Coptic translation. Indeed, an eye or feet or a hand form one and the same body, which is ours, while all serve one and the same head. Each of the limbs depends on it. The limbs cannot be the whole, not all feet or all eyes or all hands. These limbs could not live on their own, rather they would be dead. And now let's see what Paul says. Indeed, the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot would say, because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear would say, because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole body were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be? So the author of the interpretation of knowledge is using the same body imagery as Paul. In this passage, we can see how the subtext of this interpretation of knowledge is Paul's letter to Corinthians. He uses the same body as he uses. I try to highlight them. And so we have bell for eye, we have rita for foot, we have kij for hair. The author refers to the same body parts in a pericope in which he uses the same imagery to indicate the unity of the community. The only missing part, as I pointed out in yellow, is the us, the ear, mentioned in verse 16. The main question in this intention is the intention in this picture, because the author later writes, rather you should give thanks on behalf of the limbs and pray that you may too be given the grace that has been given to them. The rebel, that's me this term, member, is invited to pray in order to acquire the gift that the high-level members have, and he doesn't. In Paul's letter, there is no trace of envy. Nothing suggests that Corinthians believers feel envy because they feel inferior. And a few lines later, the author of the interpretation of knowledge says, and if one of them suffers, they suffer with him. And if one is healthy, they are healthy with him. So the first conditional clause we also find in 1 Corinthians, if one member suffers or suffer together. But not the second, because in 1 Corinthians we can read, if one member is honored, all rejoice together with it. And so in the Saidic New Testament, according to Horner. The first part, so we can say it's a literal citation. But the second part of the Coptic Nag Hammadi text differs. Because in the first Coptic text, the health or even the salvation of the entire community is mentioned. And in 1 Corinthians, the emphasis is on the joy and on the honor. So if one is saved, all the other members will be as well. And we can suppose that the healthiness of the body parts here is a figure for the healthiness of the souls of the members of the community. And in Paul, the focus is on the joy and all the parts for one part being honored. But as Dunderberg in 2004 during the 18th International Coptic Congress pointed out, there could be a different tradition for this difference between the texts. In First Clement, in a passage in which the author is talking about the discipline inside of the community, he uses two metaphors. The first one taken from the military discipline, and the second one from the unity of the body and the different positions that its members have. At the end of the second passage, he says, "Let us take our body as an example. The head without the feet is nothing. Likewise, the feet without the head are nothing. Even the smallest parts of our body are necessary and useful to the whole body, yet all the members coalesce harmoniously and unite in mutual subjection, so that the whole body may be saved." Given the same elements of subordination and salvation, is it possible that the interpretation of knowledge rather refers to First Clement than to First Corinthians? The Coptic texts say they are healthy with him, while First Clement at the end of the chapter has eis to sodzestai olon to soma, so that the whole body may be saved. This is not a direct citation, but could have happened a sort of superposition of the text due to the same semantic field referring to a key point of the argument. This aspect would surely be worth to be studied more, but let me continue with the interpretation of knowledge. And at page 18, the author writes, "Therefore, do not accuse your head for not having designated you as an eye, but rather for having designated you as a finger. And do not invite the one who has been assigned a different part, an eye, a hand, or a foot. Instead, be grateful that you exist not outside the body, but that you share the same head through which the eye, the hand, and the foot exist together with the rest of the members." This passage has many similarities with First Corinthians. First, every part of the body is allocated by the hand, and thanks to the head, it has a function. He is talking about a potential spiritual threat. Be grateful that you not exist outside of the body, so outside of the community. And because outside of the body there is death, the author is saying that if this subversive and unhappy member really wants to separate himself from the only thing awaiting for him is death. So these are the similarities. There are, however, differences. In both texts, the body parts complain, and only in the interpretation of knowledge, there is a finger mentioned, tebe. And only in First Corinthians, as I said before, 12:16, there is the ear, the us. So these body metaphors, I think, they are used with different purposes, with different aims. In the Coptic text, there is no trace of concern about the honor of the parts and of the lowest part of the body. They just have to accept the position that has been given to them. But in Paul, we see that the lower parts are the most honored ones. On the contrary, the members of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and those members of the body that we think less honorable, we clothe with greater honor. And our less respectable members are treated with greater respect, whereas our more respectable members do not need this. But God has arranged the body, has arranged the body, giving the greater honor to the inferior member, that there may be no dissension within the body, but the members may have the same care for one another. There is a sort of overturning of the message of Paul. The problem is not presented by the body parts complaining, as in 1 Corinthians, but it's the finger itself. The attitude of this member is kind of threatening the social stability of the community itself. If the member goes out from the community, it would be the, as I said before, the victory of the archons and of the powers of evil in this world. They would have succeeded in their fight against the ones who try to achieve the pneumatic world. So let me come to the conclusions. Today I've looked at the interpretation of knowledge, a text from the Nag Hammadi library that gives us a glimpse of internal problematic inside the 2nd century heterodox community. My purpose was to look at those parts that are potentially related to 1 Corinthians to see how these parts have been used in comparison. And this is what I found. First, the premises of the usage of this body imagery are the same. In the community, there are people who have received spiritual gifts and people who have not. This situation brings the author of the interpretation of knowledge to use the same rhetoric picture of the unity of the community as the unity of the body. Then there are also differences between the two texts. Firstly, in the interpretation of knowledge, there is no ear, like in 1 Corinthians. Instead, the problematic member is identified as a finger, concept that in Paul is absolutely absent. We don't read you are a ear, you are a feet. Instead, and secondly, there is this possibility that the text would refer to 1 Clement and not to 1 Corinthians due to this same semantic field confusion in the same key point of the argumentation. And then finally, while both texts use this body imagery, the purpose for which it is used is different. The core principle of the interpretation of knowledge is this. If you belong to the community, you must accept your position, and you must not complain if you're an inferior member without the spiritual gift. Just be happy in the same body, just be happy to be in the same body as the ones who have received these gifts, because only for this you will be saved. 1 Corinthians, on the other hand, distinguishes the one who have received gifts by who did not. But the emphasis is on the great honor accorded also to the lowest parts. As a body cannot survive without one member, so the Corinthian community cannot. And the lower parts should be joyful because they can participate of the spiritual gifts given to the higher part. This concept is totally not present in the Coptic Nag Hammadi text. So with this, I came in the conclusion of my paper. So I look forward to your questions and thank you for the attention.
A question again, but anyone? Yes, please, Frank.
I have a comment and a question. The comment is there is no Nag Hammadi dialect.
Okay.
We mistook folk here. The Nag Hammadi texts are written in Sahidic or in what we call now Lycopolitan.
Okay.
That was Sahaplinic. And this is a special use. Now the question. You spoke 2 times of a 2nd century community, the second place, the 2nd century heterodox community. If it was a 2nd century community, so heterodoxy was not relevant because there was more orthodoxy. And do you mean the Nag Hammadi community or the gnostic communities in and around Alexandria, from which probably the texts came?
I mean the community in Alexandria from probably which the text came. Yeah.
We don't know exactly how.
Yeah, but we don't know.
Because
Yeah, that's the point.
Yes, Paul.
I'm not going to ask a question to every paper, I promise.
You have?
Okay. Thank you very much. And I found very compelling the use of 1 Corinthians. One difference I don't think you mentioned in 1 Corinthians 12:21. The head is just a random body part, but in this text, the head is Christ. So I wonder if there's actually even more going on. Maybe the authors evoking understanding from Ephesians or Colossians, where those texts identify Christ as the head of the body, which is the same theologizing this. So do you think there's a conflation of, I would call Ephesians Pauline in the broader sense, wider Pauline themes going on within that text itself?
Yeah, this is a very interesting comment because I think this is a sort of explosion of Pauline ideas in the mind of the author. So basically, Pauline ideology and Pauline philosophy and theology just coming out for this author that wants to address these things to the community.
I had a small short remark. It was on the little addition about being healthy, which you didn't find in Corinthians. But if we cut off the whole honor thing, if we take it off, then it's a very natural, you know, if one part suffers, and then you have the opposite, like be healthy or suffer a body. So it was like more a harmonization to the context. I felt because the doxa doesn't make sense if you cut it out from So,
Yeah.
okay.